1 in 3 is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, warriors. Welcome to 1 in 3. I'm your host, Ingrid. Last week, we heard Dana's powerful story. Today, in part 2, we explore how she transformed her trauma into purpose, creating a safe space for others through her lived experience. Let's dive back in with Dana. Hi, Dana. Welcome back. So last episode, we got to hear about your background and the incredible amount of obstacles seems like a very lame word for everything that you've been through, but all of the things that you've overcome to get to where you are now. And despite all of these things that you faced, you came through and you started a nonprofit called Survivor Center. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about the specificities of what you're doing with that. So thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and to share what we're doing. So yeah, now that you've gotten to know me a little bit and to hear all of the obstacles and circumstances I overcame when it was me and the Holy Ghost, right? Because it was just me and him talking about it. When I thought about the Survivor Center and what I wanted or what was needed, right? Because it was more of a need than a want. Like nobody wants to start a domestic violence organization. You start seeing the need. So I, for one, knew what I needed. I needed someone to be there with me, someone to understand, someone to not think I was crazy when I shared my story. I needed someone to believe me. I needed someone to hold my hand through court. I needed to hear from other women what they were living through. And so when I first birthed the Survivor Center, we started out just doing online support groups where women from the area as well as other states can join in online and we can be a support system to each other. And in that journey, I met amazing women all over the world. Like we have someone from California, someone from Ohio, someone from New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. It's just amazing how many women in different areas are all experiencing similar types of situations. And so we started out with the support center and just having these conversations, talking about where they're at, in life and what's going on. A lot of women are still battling either in family court or they're battling. Some of them were still at home with their abusers. And some of them were ready to start dating and were afraid to date. So we started developing programs. So I created what I call like a survivor support bootcamp, where we created a model and not even intentionally, we just went through. So like I have a book of my survivor support group when I went to therapy for survivorship. And I have a book of things that we accumulated that I progressed through. So different things that I learned along the way, like what are the forms of abuse? There's a lot of people that don't know financial abuse is abuse. They don't know that name calling is abuse. They don't know that someone telling you where you can and cannot go is abuse, or what clothes you can wear, or why do you have on makeup? So I started looking at that book, and like each day we would tackle something. So we would tackle all the forms of abuse. We would all talk about what we endured, what we lived through, and we would also talk about what we did to get past that. And then we'd go into the next group and we'd talk about maybe red flags. We also talked about childhood trauma and things that we witnessed as kids, things that we lived through as kids. And ironically, everyone in the group shared a story of childhood trauma, except for one girl who said, "Oh, I had a great childhood. My parents were awesome." And by the time we finished the group, she said, "I'd like to change that. My father was verbally abusive. My father used to call me this, and this." And so I began to take a look at all of those weeks, and I think we were kind of like into week 16 or 17, and I realized, wow, we have a foundation. We went through all of these different things, discussing all these different subjects about abuse and about our childhood. and recognizing how we got to where we are. Now, how do we move past that? We also did things, I gave the girls homework, right? So after we talked about the childhood trauma, I said to everybody, now I want you to go home and you have homework. I want you to write down a letter to that 4-year-old you. And I say 4-year-old because that's when my first trauma happens. Ironically, whenever you ask someone what was their earliest childhood memory, it's a trauma. So I want you to go home and write that letter to that 4-year-old girl, because what I want to do is teach you how to go back and hug that little girl, how to heal her, how to tell her it's going to be okay. You turn out freaking amazing. And although you couldn't protect her, it wasn't your job to. Acknowledge the fact that your parents failed, whether it was intentional or not, whether it was mental illness or drug addiction, or they were in their own life of violence. No matter what it was, we need to go back and help that little girl run through the field again. Be innocent again, and tell her it's going to be okay. And so everybody wrote these amazing letters, and the next group, we shared our letters. We talked about it. We laughed. We cried. We show empathy to each other. We're supportive. We're not judgmental. We came up with rules. What we say here stays here. If you see someone outside in the public, you don't share. And one of our survivors is a pastor, and she spoke about a lot of trauma she went through. We had a rule. You can't talk about this outside. So it made everyone be in a safe space to share things they never shared with anyone. Each and every person in the group said, I've never told this, or I never thought about this, or I haven't gone back into my childhood to recognize all the things that I went through. So that boot camp that we created a model for what healing looked like. I remember one of the survivors wouldn't even turn on her camera. She would just come kind of listen. She, once in a while she would turn on the camera. Then we would talk about affirmations. I always like to end the support group on a positive. I like to check in with everybody. Where are you? How you feeling right now? And we remind ourselves that we're not that 4-year-old girl anymore. We're a grown woman now. We're in a safe place. And those are things we live through. Those are not who we are. Those are not stripes that are painted on us that we have to carry for the rest of our lives. And so a couple of groups in, now this woman's got her light on. Now she's got her camera on. Then one day I'm like, oh my God, you look freaking amazing. Like, what did you do? And she starts laughing. She's like, I don't know. I took a shower. I washed my hair. And I was like, and how did that feel? Like, how are you feeling? And she shared how writing that letter really set her free. She shared how walking back through her life and listening to other people's lives set her free, and how she wasn't carrying those chains anymore. We also talked about forgiveness, and that's a very difficult conversation when it comes to survivorship. You have to forgive yourself for staying. You have to forgive yourself for allowing your kids to grow up in that environment. You have to forgive yourself for forgiving him. There is so many different aspects to forgiveness. And when you find that forgiveness, when you encompass it, when it becomes you, you're actually lifting weights off your own shoulders. Walking around angry, sad, and mad every day is very heavy. It's like you won't even want to get out of bed because you're carrying all that pain and shame and guilt and worthlessness. And honestly, finding forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you. It takes a weight off your shoulders, and you start living different, you start eating different, you start thinking different. A lot of times we'll pray in the group. Sometimes we need to go into spiritual warfare. I believe in deliverance ministry. So sometimes, we have to deliver demons that we're carrying, that we've carried for a lifetime, that we didn't even know we had. And they're keeping us heavy and bogged down and sad and depressed and suicidal. And sometimes it's just a matter of checking in with each other and saying, okay, so no homework tonight. Everyone just take the day off. And what are you going to do for your self-care? And we'll talk about, someone will say, well, I don't really have the money. Okay, so go take a walk. Go outside and smell the flowers. Like, when was the last time you stopped to smell the roses? We're so busy surviving, we forget to survive. We're so busy thinking about all the thoughts, what I should have done, what I could have done, how do I do it different? I should have left sooner. Okay, let's just stop for a moment and breathe. One of the main things we learn is how to take a deep breath. Breathe in good oxygen, let out all the bad stuff. Take a walk, go smell the flowers, go look at a butterfly, go enjoy the scenery, go see a mountain, go to the beach. That's my happy place. I know whenever I'm stressed, no matter where I'm at, I can close my eyes and I can hear the roar of the ocean. I can smell the salt water. I can literally feel my toes in the sand, no matter where I'm at, no matter what I'm going through. Teaching yourself how to center yourself and be calm is so important. And so that survivor support group, it's going strong. And a lot of the women that started with us are still with us. Some women have gotten through and moved on, and some women stayed for a little while and left. It just, in some cases, is triggering because they don't want to talk about the memories. They don't want to go back and, rip off the top and deal with them. But then other women are like, one girl in particular said to me, Dana, me and my daughter went through sexual assault. And I went and I had her do the homework assignment. And she wrote the letter. And then we went to the park and we set it on fire. And we got rid of it. And it's out there. And it's not a secret anymore. And it's not a weight anymore. So the group not only helped her, but it also helped her child. So informing that, coming to the realization that so many survivors have dealt with childhood trauma and adverse childhood experiences, we started doing mentoring with the youth. I'm like, it would be so amazing if I could get a hold of those kids and help them heal before they become survivors. As a preventative measure, let's take classes and learn how to become credible messengers, where the life I lived through wasn't for nothing. I can go back and tell a kid, well, this is what happened to me, and these are the choices I made, and this is what it ended me up in. So maybe if we teach them how to survive what they're currently dealing with, how to deal with maybe a parent that has mental illness, maybe a parent that has drug addiction, maybe a parent that's prostituting or being trafficked. If we teach them how to navigate their life when they don't have an active parent present, maybe they won't grow up to be a survivor, or maybe they won't grow up to be an abuser. It's begun to craft some of the work we did is now going to help some of the work we're doing so that we could create the same types of groups, the support groups for the youth as well, in the hopes that one day we can have a world that's free of violence, and that's my dream, like to have a world that's free of violence where men, women, children, everyone feels safe. So another thing I do is court accompaniment. So if I have someone who's going to family court, or even, and I say family court, automatically you think husband and wife, it may even be DCF or ACS, and you need someone to go with you, we'll do that as well. We'll go hold your hand through the matter. Being that I spent so many years in family court, some things I learned along the way is, one, don't sit in the room with your abuser or your accuser, because you get tormented and tortured through that hour, so that by the time you get into the courtroom, you're so shaken, you're so upset, you can't speak, you can't talk, nothing comes out right, and you look like a buffoon. So
yeah, you look like the crazy one.
Yeah. So just somewhere else and block it out. You don't hear what they're saying and you're not being tormented. And those little tidbits matter. And then I teach you how to present yourself in court, how to be calm, how to breathe, how to go to the beach when you're feeling stressed out, or wherever your happy place is. So that's a big part of it. And there are cases where I do court watch online. Thank God for Zoom. I sit in a California courtroom all the time, watching what's happening, and not just that I'm watching, but that the judge knows I'm watching, that the judge is recognizing that there are people in the room court watching to see how you're acting, to see, are you following the Constitution, which they are not. Many people don't know that family court is a court that was not made behind the Constitution. Family court is a rogue court that follows their own rules and regulations, and the judge makes all the decisions and you get no jury. Court says that we're supposed to be able to be heard by a jury of our peers, but not in family court. Okay. And let's just point out that when you go before these judges, they are going to appoint you, most times, evaluator. They're going to appoint you the child lawyer. In some cases, women get appointed a lawyer. You get appointed services. You get appointed forensics. And these are all handpicked people by the judge. And if you come in there and you're upset or emotional, you're going to need a mental health evaluation. Or if the opposite party accuses you of mental health, you're going to need it. If they accuse you of drug addiction, you're going to need to go get tested. I mean, no matter what they say, the judge has a handful of people that he works with that are going to side with him the way he wants.
Well, and when you've been victimized and you've been either literally or figuratively beat down by this person, and now you're in the same room as this person, and most of the time, and I'm not going to generalize abusers as having a diagnosed mental illness, but if they're carrying these other possible mental illness diagnoses, they lack empathy, they lack self-accountability. So they're going to go in and they're going to be calm and collected because they don't believe that they've done anything wrong, and they don't believe that they can be convicted of anything because I've done nothing wrong. Look at her. She's obviously the crazy one. I think a very good example, this was in a courtroom, and I bring this up a lot, is the Gabby Petito documentary. And, you know, even if people haven't watched the documentary on Netflix, a lot of people have seen the clips of when they were pulled over by the police because the police were called and alerted by a passerby saying this man is hitting this woman in the car. That's why they were pulled over. But the way the scenario plays out, Gabby has now reached this breaking point where she is crying. She is taking accountability for her actions, which were provoked by Brian, I think his name is. I can't remember.
Whatever.
Right, whatever his name is. And you watch it play out, and it started with this girl is the victim, and because of how she was reacting and his ability to remain calm and then even make jokes about it, turned him into he's the good guy, she's the aggressor. You know, he's given the hotel room. He's sitting in the police car making jokes with the police officer, talking about what music do you like, and the officer saying like, yeah, my wife can get like that too. It turned into that situation, and that exact same scenario can play out in, unfortunately, the courtroom where there is big decisions being made.
And that, you know, is a reality. And the fact that the judge has all say. Most of the judges were lawyers at one point, right? That's the pathway to becoming a judge. And some of them abuse their spouse. And so if I call it out and I say this is what's happening, I'm calling myself out. Some of them come in, you know, depending on what mood they're in. You know, that's something that the lawyer will say to you. The lawyer will be like, yeah, you have all the evidence, all the proof, and depends on what mood the judge is in. If you learn about what it takes to become a lawyer, one of the things that they learn is you're not here to defend your client. You are supposed to be upholding the law of the lands. So no matter whether your client is right or wrong, you're supposed to be upholding the law of the land. And then we can even go a little deeper and talk about what land and what laws does the family court abide by, because we're supposed to be on maritime law. You know, there's just so many catch-22s. There's a whole language that most of us don't understand, that they all say, are you the custodial guardian of so-and-so? And you're like, no, I'm the mother of the child. Like, there's certain language you have to use because they make your child into a commodity. You know, that child, as long as you continue to fight, everybody in that system makes money. So the judge is making money, the lawyer's making money, the child advocate, the gal, whatever you want to call them, the therapist, the investigators, the forensics, they're all making money. So can you imagine how much they made out of me for 17 years? Even though I didn't pay any of it out of pocket, I didn't pay for my lawyer, I got court appointed, everything. But there are bonds that go into federal and family courts. And that's one of them. Your child has a number on it. That's why Social Security numbers are made. They track how much you're worth, and then they drag out your life for as long as you can. Let's talk about how many missed days of work because you're in family court, or you have a visitation, or you have some sort of evaluation, or, you know, accusing of this or that. You've got to go take a mental health. Now we want you to go see this therapist, which they know that therapist is going to be biased to whatever the judge decides. The judge says, I want mom to have the kid. The therapist is going to side with mom. I want dad to have the kid. This is literally, you know, when you think about a work environment, think about the judge who works there every day with the same lawyers, with the same staff, with the same legal system with the same players. They go out and they have golf games together, they have brunches together, they go to family barbecues together. Like everybody working in that building are friends. So you'll come into the courtroom one day or the courtroom waiting area, and like I'm looking for my lawyer, I pop open a door and he's in there laughing and joking with the opposing lawyer. And I'm like, what kind of crap is this? Like so many light bulbs went off, like this is not okay. And then they'll be like, hold on a second, and they'll go into the courtroom before me. So like you guys decided what was going to happen before I even entered the room.
I love that part of what you do is being there for victims, because you do go in, you're unfamiliar with the scenario. Again, I know I already said you're already victimized. You're afraid. Your brain is just spinning. And you mentioned it in the last episode. You just like word vomit. Like, well, and then there was this, and then there was this, and then there was this. And it may all be important information to share, but if you're just throwing it out there in this jumbled mess, it's going to sound crazy.
Yeah.
And while you're sitting there, you're being told by your lawyer, like, well, you might just want to go along with this because you're going to have to fight to get this. You know, you start to get backed into a corner. So I think it's amazing to be able to have somebody sitting behind you like, no, you've got this. You know, you're good. Keep going. You've got this. That's amazing that you do that.
I think too, while your child's life is at stake, no, your nerves are running, your mind is running. You think this lawyer is here to help you. You think they're telling you, you know, the best advice. No, they're trying to make their day easier. They're trying to make the time go by quicker. And I know people have paid $100,000 into lawyers and got nowhere. And a lot of times they tell you, don't mention domestic violence, because when you mention domestic violence, I have to prove more. And you're like, what? I am a victim. What do you mean don't mention what I lived through? Don't mention what type of person he is. Oh, well, did he do that to the kids? I mean, he did it in front of the kids. And in some cases, he did it to the kids, you know, and they're like, well, let's not mention that.
Right. Right, because it's uncomfortable and nobody wants to talk about it. And then now, you know, there's this whole thing, especially in the high profile cases with the celebrities of, oh, did he really abuse her? Or did that really happen to her? Is she going after money?
That's what I
and
was
she's making up this whole story. So there's all of these biases that are sitting there.
So when you think about it, right, let's put that into like a synopsis. So first of all, I just endured the worst relationship of my life. I probably came close to being murdered, emotionally, physically, whatever. And then I come into the courtroom and I'm telling you, well, he's done this and he's done that and he's done this. And they're looking at you like, yeah, right. That sounds so bizarre. I can't believe that would ever happen. Nobody in their right mind would do something like that. So not only did you survive it, but now that you've got to survive the ridicule of what you survived, and your very testimony of what you survived is at judgment.
Well, and it is. I mean, these stories are some of them are so outlandish. I was just on a different podcast and I was saying, I'm like, you know, I tell my story and I think it sounds like a movie.
Yeah.
You know, or in some cases, it's not even a movie. You couldn't write that script into, you know, a director, because they're going to be like, no one's going to believe that happened. That can't be a story. That's so crazy. But these things have legitimately happened to individuals, but it's just so unbelievable to I hate to use the word normal, but to a person who has not been in those situations. Like, you cannot imagine that another human would do that to a person.
And that's exactly what it is. And so I remember I was giving a speech in front of City Hall in Manhattan, and you know, you tell your story and you tell what you survived, and you're like maybe talking to the police and asking for help, and now you're being judged for what you just survived. Like, they don't even believe you survived that. So like, how do you get help? And so we go back to family court. When you mention that you're a survivor, there's supposed to be certain protocols they follow. You're not supposed to give any visitation or custody until the criminal cases are solved, and that's not always the case. Or there's a new court called IDV, which is integrated domestic violence. So instead of having one criminal case and one family court case, they have one judge to hear both. because it was so hard to get the information back and forth of what happened in the criminal case and what happened in the family court case. And it should be one person presiding overall to know what's going on in your criminal aspects to decide whether or not I should allow you to visit this child. But I even gone through that court myself, and I was convinced to drop the charges and he would drop visitation. What I was not told is he could come back a year later and apply for visits again, and I could never recharge him for a case I dropped.
Yeah, it's disgusting. I feel like we could talk about this for like another 2 hours, but I wanted to go back to the therapy kind of side of what you do at the Survivor Center. So how do people get to you? Is it a self-referral or is it some other kind of referral?
So we have a website. It's survivorcenter.org. You can go to that. You could call my Florida phone number. I have a number I share, 386-450-19. And I don't like to call it therapy. We call it a support group. And yeah, you can find me those ways. We also do different things. Like we go out to meetings. We personally, I sit in and I listen to what's going on in all the different areas where survivors need to be heard. So I go in and I kind of like listen in on meetings. I talk about what's a good thing for a survivor or what's not a good thing. We look at like, I'll sit with the police advocates and I'll hear about their cases. I'll sit in groups where all different organizations come together who are supposed to be working for the good of survivors. And I'll say, hey, you know, that's not okay. That's going to cause more harm. Or, hey, why aren't we doing things this way? So just getting back to like different services that Survivor Center does. So like we're kind of in all aspects when it comes to domestic violence. We also meet with the neighborhood shelter and we have an ongoing relationship with them. So if a survivor calls and needs to escape, I can get her into that shelter. If she calls and she needs legal assistance, I could get her connected with an organization that does legal services. If she needs a food pantry, I can find that for you. If she can't get into one shelter, I have a list of other places I could look for you. There's legal referrals. There's so many different forms of assistance survivors need when they come out. And so just to touch on a little bit of all of that and mental health, you know, there's so much help, you know, and if I don't have what you need, I'm going to find it.
So it's almost like a yellow page. I don't know if anybody knows what the yellow pages are anymore, but it's almost like a yellow pages for domestic violence.
Yes.
Kind of. And you mentioned before, people come at all stages. Thank you. Stages of domestic violence. They are either still very much a victim or they've removed themselves from that scenario, or even possibly somebody that's been out for a while but just needs that extra support.
Yeah, so we can also do safety planning. Like I've actually gone boots on the ground and picked a survivor up from the home and helped her get out with her animal. I've also helped another survivor get into a shelter and help place her animal. We've connected with an amazing organization called Safe Haven who work with pets. So if you're going into a shelter, obviously your animal can't go in this state. So Safe Haven will help find a foster home to hold your pet until you're done. So yeah, there's all types of services that are connected.
Now, you mentioned cameras and stuff. So is it an actual brick and mortar group meeting or is it virtual?
Everything for right now is virtual. I work from home and I work in the field, so I'll go out and have meetings in other places, but we don't have a building yet. We're hoping to have one.
You also mentioned that you were collaborating with people who are in various states. So do they have survivors and victims joining these meetings from their areas as well?
Definitely. So we work by referral, you know, so if a survivor that's in my support group will come and say, hey, Dana, you know, I got somebody else that wants to join the group. I've got somebody else that wants to join the group. Y si hablamos español. So we do speak Spanish. Thank you for my upbringing, my Hispanic heritage, that I speak Spanish. So if we do have someone that calls and speaks Spanish, we can, you know, help them as well.
And how often do you meet?
Once a week. We typically meet once a week, and we've changed dates because I do have a child that plays football, and I'm also a football mom, a sports mom. So I'm on the field a lot. I was the team mom for our last team. So I'm hands-on all the time. But we typically meet on Fridays. I found it to be a day where everyone's not in a rush, not going anywhere. On Saturday, our meetings started to be an hour, and sometimes they can go over. Sometimes it can be an hour and a half. And depending on the topic, we may need a little extra guidance. So I'm open, like whatever is needed for the day, that's what I do.
And can people join in the support at any point? It's not like we're starting a session next month, you have to wait. It can be anytime.
It could be anytime, and as the need comes up, we go back through the program and we start, with these classes again, and we recycle them. And so people can join at any time. I've had women that were still married, still in an abusive situation. I mean, I went to the gas station and you can tell, right? You just know when someone's going through something. And I spoke to a woman and she was crying and her husband was abusive and controlling. And, I gave her some of the options. I gave her the support group number. We connected on social media and we kept in contact. And I told her what her options were, who she could call, to find out about the divorce and all of those things. And the next time we ran into each other, she was going through divorce.
Oh, that's awesome.
I just want to put a plug in. When you are ready to leave an abuser, it is the most dangerous time in your life. Many women don't make it out. I know women have died in their driveway trying to escape. You have to be so careful not to lead on to this is what you're doing. You have to be so careful to know whether or not there are signs that he could murder, and not just you, your children as well. It's the most dangerous time in a survivor's life. And so
yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. I usually do try to, whenever the conversation comes up in regards to leaving an abusive relationship, I do try to plug in that information. I think it's a 70% increase of lethality within 2 weeks of making known or actually leaving. And I think even up to a year, there's a 75, and I may be wrong on these statistics, but 75% increased risk of physical violence within a year, not necessarily homicide, but that first number, it is 70% increased risk of homicide in 2 weeks. So yes, very important. And I also want to say there are a lot of different risk assessments that professionals and advocates can use to determine your level of risk. But ultimately, it's your gut feeling. If you think that your abuser is capable or may try to kill you, that's real. Then that's your prediction right there. And, one of the highest, probably I think the highest risk indicating lethality is strangulation, because you did mention that. It increases your risk by 750%. Of that person killing you.
So they say strangulation is practice. He's preparing to kill you.
He is. I mean, that's him saying, I am a killer. I'm a killer.
Yep.
There's really no more intimate way to murder someone than strangulation. It's actual hands-on murder. Okay. One more thing that you mentioned too that I thought was really incredible is that the writing down the stories. And I've looked into narrative therapy because, I have a podcast and, people come on and they tell their stories, and it's something that I encourage if it's something that you're able to do. I understand that not everybody is able to tell their story out loud, especially on a platform of a podcast where there's going to be a lot of people that hear it. And some people can't even tell their story to those within their trustworthy circle. And I understand that too, but there is such a therapeutic event that happens when you get your story out. There's a few things that can happen. One, you're able to look at your story from an outside perspective. Like you read your story if you actually have it physically written down, and it's like your brain's able to process it differently. It's not you saying like, this happened to me, like, was it really abuse? You're able to read it and say like, oh my God, that is clearly abuse. Like if you look at it like this happened to somebody else, you're able to see it as a very different outlook. And getting it out, like you mentioned, you're not carrying it, you're putting down those stones. And writing it down is such a great way to do it. If you don't feel comfortable talking about it, you can write it out and then you can burn it. Nobody ever has to see it.
Yep. I think journaling is an amazing thing when you're in a safe space and you're not concerned about somebody reading your journal. You can put your deepest thoughts into it, which is a lot why I I wrote the book, Savage Angel. And that book talks about putting on the full armor of God, about being in court, about understanding that it wasn't even about the Father. It was about wickedness in high places. It was about the rulers of the world. It was about taking on Satan himself, because who else is going to come at me for my religion, come at me for the way I'm raising my child? Like, he's in Cub Scouts. What do you mean? Like, you're taking him on vacations. You know what? He was a straight A honor roll student. Like, we were prepared for these trips. But it was in those moments that I started, thinking about all the things that I survived. And I used to always help women and say, you should go read this book. You should go read that book. And God was like, no, you should sit down and write a book. And so I wrote out this book, and I wrote out information about fasting, about praying, and I talk about different areas in the Bible, and it was all spiritually led. And I was like, all right, God, whatever you want this book to say, because you know who's going to get the book. You know who's going to read the book. And it's sold on Amazon. It's Savage Angel by Hanuszczak. And then as people started buying the book, like one girl said to me, I've never ever sat down and read a whole book, but I'm going to read yours. And then another friend said to me, I always help everybody else write. Your book inspired me to sit down and write. And then someone else is like, I don't really understand the Bible. I don't get it. And this is a girl that works at my bank. She's like, but oh my God, you make it so clear, so easy to understand, so easy to follow. She's like, now I feel like I'm reading the Bible because I'm reading some of it in your book, and then you break it down and explain it in like layman's terms that it's so easy to understand. She's like, I'm so excited.
I love that. Okay, so since we're talking about like where you can find your book, let's have you share, the other information. You gave out a number, if you don't mind giving that out again, and any
Sure.
other links or websites. And you are going to create a profile. I'll have that connected to your episode. So if anybody, like if you're in a place where you can't write all this stuff down, I'll have it in the show notes. I'll have Dana's link there where you can just go to the website, and all of that will be there as well. But do you mind just sharing it again?
Not at all. So again, my phone number is 386-450-19. That is the Florida area code, 386. So everyone knows I'm in Florida. Also, my website is survivorcenter.org. If you want to email me, you can email info@survivorcenter.org. If you go on the website, the link to the book is there also. If you go on the website, you can also fill out a form. There's like maybe 5 questions, your name, your number, email address, and you can contact us. The website, I wrote this book, and as I built this nonprofit from the ground up, I've put all my money into it. So everything, all the proceeds for the book go straight back to the Survivor Center. I also do prison ministry. So I go into the prison and I meet with the women and remind them that there is still a world out here that loves them and forgives them.
You're doing incredible work. Before we end, is there anything else that you would like to say to anybody?
If I made it through, you can too.
And that's so incredibly powerful. And it's so incredibly true. And I love what you had said in the last episode, that you were born for a time such as this. And I truly believe that you wanted to be the poster child. I want to say that, when you're in a dark place, which, my goodness, you've been in the darkest of places, and it takes just seeing a glimmer of hope to be able to propel yourself to get out of it. And it may take a long time to get out of it, but just to know that there's like that little light of hope. And I think that you for sure are that. If you're not a huge beacon of light shining on people, like, you're at least that glimmer of hope. And I'm so grateful, one, for you coming on and joining me for these 2 episodes on 1 and 3, but then for everything that you're doing. And clearly you're pouring your soul into this. And I think it's absolutely amazing, and the work you're doing is incredible. And keep shining that light, because I think you are definitely helping save lives.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. It was wonderful to come on the show and sit with you, and I'll come back anytime you need. Thank you.
Thanks to Dana for joining me again today, and thank you for listening. The link to Dana's 1 and 3 profile can be found in the show notes. It includes links to her website, socials, and where to purchase her book. I will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, stay strong, and wherever you are in your journey, always remember, you are not alone. Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1 in 3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1 in 3 Podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1 in 3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.